This is TechTalk Detroit with Brian Spurgeon and Chuck Lobert. TechTalk Detroit brings you the latest in tech news and Detroit happenings every week.
Welcome back to TechTalk Detroit. Happy to have you with us again this week. Brian, how you doing?
Doing good, Chuck. Got a good stretch of weather, so been outside a lot, and everything's coming along well. How about you?
Yeah, no, I'm loving the weather. You know me, I like the hot. So this past week has been perfect as far as I'm concerned. Hot and sunny, and spent some time outside helping a friend of mine pour some concrete. So that was a little bit of torture, but it was still fun. Nice to be out there and learn something new. I've never done that before, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah, well, not a better time to learn than when it's 95 and blistering hot either.
Yeah, it was hot. I got super burned, especially like on my shoulders. I was peeling for days. But it was cool. It was a good time, and been working on the basement still. So it was nice to actually get outside as opposed to down in the basement. So that was good. But yeah, definitely enjoying the weather, and it looks like we got more heat coming here. So as far as I'm concerned, that's perfect. I know you don't like it quite as much as I do, but
no, I don't. But honestly, this has probably been maybe I'm just getting older, but I haven't. It hasn't bothered me too much this year. I'll be honest. So
yeah,
I'm okay with it for now.
Nice. Yeah, so we thought this week what we would touch on is around Microsoft 365, kind of some security best practices, and really the best ways to make sure that your business is secure if you're in Microsoft 365. So that's often a concern that comes up as we're out talking to people is, if my data is out in Microsoft's cloud, is it secure? How do I know it's safe? All of that kind of stuff. So our answer is really always the same. It all comes down to how it's set up and if it's set up to be protected or not. I mean, there's natural security built in, but then there's a lot that you can configure and really should configure when you're in Microsoft 365 to truly make sure that your data is secure. So, that's what we wanted to talk about today was some of the top ways to just make sure that you are secure. So, we'll jump right in. I think one of the first things really is around passwords and making sure you've got a good policy and everything. From your point of view, Brian, what do you recommend when it comes to password security and such?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways you can go. I think the obvious thing is you want to have a very complex password. So the longer the password, the better. And it's obviously good to mix in different types of characters. So uppercase letters, lowercase. If symbols certainly helps the mix, and and you should have a good password rotation. It's good to at least have, I would say, at least 5 different passwords before one can be reused, or just simply kill the reusing of the passwords. And I think one of the features that are out there now that a lot of people use for password management that makes this a lot easier and really just checks the box where you don't have to worry about it is if you start to adopt like a single sign-on application. There's a lot of third-party ones. Microsoft has it if you have the right licensing level. But basically what that allows you to do is just create an obnoxiously long password that you would never remember in a million years and have that apply. And then you have a very, complex single password that you use to manage all of your accounts. And I think that's probably the preferred way to go about it. But ultimately, yeah, it's just having the longer the better, and a mix of upper, lowercase, and symbols with non-repeating letters or some numbers.
Yeah, I know I use a password management software, and I love it because, like you say, you can kind of just tell it to create a password that's super strong, and then all I have to remember is my master password into the app itself. So that's always nice. And then, kind of the next one, I guess, that, we've talked about quite a bit, but really it's, we'll bring it up again because it is so important when we're talking about Microsoft 365 is MFA, multi-factor authentication. So if you go to log in, especially if you're logging in from an unknown source or different location where it's going to prompt you, it's going to send you a text message with a code, something along those lines, use an app. There's lots of different ways to accomplish the task, but you have to have that second layer of authentication before you can get in. And, really, why don't you explain kind of what's the benefit of that? Like, why is that? We always say it's an absolute must for Microsoft 365 and really for any cloud solution. Mm-hmm. Why do we say that?
Yeah, I know. Obviously, we beat up the MFA pretty good, and I think it's something that we can't really talk about enough, because I think there's not enough organizations that are really adopting it yet. But ultimately, what MFA is going to allow you to do is, in the event of one of your users being compromised, or their password was given up and is known, when that person tries to make a login attempt, predominantly to Office 365 through the web portal, what it's going to do with MFA enabled is then generate a request to the actual user whose account was compromised, and ask them to, it'll tell them, here's your code, or there's been a login attempt on your account. So what happens then is, that point in time, that user knows I was not doing anything at that moment to generate that. It's a huge red flag. That tells the user my account's probably compromised. Without MFA in place, what essentially you're doing is, once that user's account and that password is out there, then the third party has the ability to log into their account and do a whole slew of things that'll compromise it. So they can come in, they can create forwarding rules, which I'm sure we'll get into here. They can do all these different things to basically take over that email and kind of just stealthily be in the back scenes and figure out how they want to go about attacking that business. So I think MFA is absolutely critical. For us, Microsoft requires us to do it as a Microsoft partner supporting clients. And I think, that's a mandate that you're going to see become the standard over time. But MFA is absolutely critical there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've had that happen where I've gotten a notification and I hadn't tried to log in. So I apologize. You can probably hear my dog in the background. One of the wonderful things of working from home is there's certain noises you just can't control.
Yeah, absolutely.
My dog barking is one of those. But yeah,
it must be the mail time.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably an Amazon delivery or something. You mentioned the forwarding. So why don't we just jump right into that then? We talk about forwarding, and sometimes there's a scenario where you need forwarding set up. So do you just blanket just say nope, no forwarding whatsoever? Or, what's the right, when we talk about a best practice for Microsoft 365, what's the right way to set up the forwarding?
Yeah, so by default, any user can log into their Office 365 account and create a forwarding rule. And it's common practice when somebody goes out of town for a week, right? They're going to bring up their out of office. And a lot of times what happens is they're just going to create a CC rule where any email coming in, a copy gets forwarded to another user that's, handling their accounts while they're gone. So as you can imagine, that's usually the first step when an account is taken over, is they're going to log in and they're going to create a forwarding rule to go to some third-party external email address so that they can start to monitor emails. So what we typically do is we disable that for everyone that's not an administrator level, or what we'll do is we might create a new security group that, maybe there's 2 or 3 people that are approved to create forwarding rules for other people. And if you're not part of that group, you can't create a forwarding rule. And, it's an extra step for some users, especially if you're trying to wrap up and just get out of town for vacation. But ultimately, it's just them putting in a ticket to us, and then we can log in and handle it for them. And it's just a safer way. You're not having to worry about auditing your Office 365 to see if there's forwarding rules and such. So definitely that's a huge piece of advice for anybody managing an Office 365 tenant. I would strongly consider enabling that policy to disable standard users from creating their own rules. And I would certainly audit all of your forwarding rules now, just to make sure there's none in place that you're not aware of.
And that's one of the typical security threats, right? If somebody gets in, they'll set up a forwarding rule in the background, and the user won't even know that it's happening, but now emails are getting forwarded. And that's one of the top ways when you look at stuff like, wired instructions being sent, different things like that. It's one of the top ways that happens, is because they're seeing all of these forwarded emails, so they start to know the work pattern and what the emails look like and all of that kind of stuff, and so they're able to respond to one of those emails and say, hey, wire me this $100,000 for whatever it is. So it's definitely a big one to keep in mind. And kind of along those same lines, with all of this, you put all these protections in place, but it's also really important to make sure that you train your users, right? So you got to make sure that they know, what to look for, what to be suspicious of, what's okay to do, what's not okay to do. Really, I guess, what else can you think of that kind of goes into that, the training of the users and making sure that they understand not the real technical details, but the minimum that they need to know to make sure that they're keeping themselves and the business safe?
Yeah, I think, that's going to be your number one threat is internal with your own employees. And it's not malicious intent typically, but it's the not understanding, not knowing what to look for, right? I mean, we're in a day and age where, I know myself personally, I probably get 200 to 300 emails that come through per day. Realistically, I'm probably getting 700 or 800 emails that hit my account a day. It's just, the spam filter's picking up a good percentage of it, and I'm not even seeing it. But it's not foolproof. And out of those 200 to 300, maybe one or two gets through that are legit. And I think we're in a day and age where email is almost every business is so reliant upon it that we're sending, emails all day back and forth that some of these phishing attempts, they're so sophisticated and they look like a common email that you deal with daily. And this goes back to the forwarding rule, especially if there's somebody that's been in your account, seeing who you deal with on the regular, they're able to take that email and basically spoof the email address, right? They change one little character in the email address that it's coming from, instead of bankofamerica.com, it's Bank of America with 2 A's.com, at the end. And you don't see that. And they've, photoshopped the images and such in there. And that's what happens is you're just going through your day and you're giving up information. So, there's the security awareness training. That's going to be one of the most, crucial things in terms of training your employees. They're going to simulate phishing emails. They're going to send it to everybody. And if somebody fails one, if they click a link or they do something in that email that would have compromised you, it's going to immediately let them know. And then, it sends them through a retraining, right? They have to go through and do a recertification of it. And I think companies who really see the value in that and adopt that strategy do well, because a lot of things you can do with those is you can custom create your own email templates to send to your own employees too. So if you deal with certain financial institutions or clients on the regular, you can take one of those emails and simulate it no different than what a hacker would be doing and send it to your own people to see if they're catching out. And I think that's one of the big steps, because that first time somebody gets phished, clicks a link and realizes they screwed up, it's a big reality check because, thankfully nothing happened. It was a simulated email, but then I think the reality sets in terms of, okay, if that was real, I would have been in some trouble. So I think that's going to be the first step is the security awareness training. And then, the second step to that is making sure that you have very good auditing and logging turned on your Office 365. And, when you do that, they've got a lot of sophistication built in the back end where you can see which users are getting targeted the most. And I think it's a very good strategy from a training standpoint to notify your at-risk, your highest risk users and show them, look at your account because of the type of work you do. You're the biggest at-risk person in the company. You're getting targeted all day, every day. And that's not the user's fault. However, it's important to train that user so that they're aware of the fact that they are a heavily targeted person. I think as a company, anybody who's on your website is posted, anybody who's listed on there is, your C-level folks, any of the management staff that you have on your website, you have to anticipate those are at-risk people because the email address is right there. Now, right. One of the big steps is checked off, right? Somebody going and saying, all right, let me look at Vision Computer Solutions. Let's try to see if we can get into them today. We've got employees right there, and now they have a starting place. So I think it's important to not only train the people to know what a phishing attack looks like, but to also have your at-risk people aware that they are as such, so that they take that little extra time to analyze anything that just seems a little bit suspicious.
Yeah, and I think the last three that really tie in specifically to any Microsoft 365 licensing, the Microsoft 365 standard or premium, one, using dedicated admin accounts, just like you would recommend on a server side of things. You want to make sure that you're using dedicated admin accounts in Microsoft 365. Anybody that is an admin should have their own personal account, so that it's really the only time they're in the admin account with those elevated privileges is when they need to make changes from an admin side of things. But the other two, I think, are really important, and that's protection against malware and protection against ransomware. And there's certain things built into Microsoft 365 that helps with both of those, and around blocking certain file types or extensions, mail rules, threat protection, different things like that. So when it comes to protecting against malware, when it comes to protecting against ransomware, is there anything in particular that you think makes sense as far as a kind of a high level setup there from a best practice standpoint?
Yeah, I think for one, in terms of the ransomware, the malware, a lot of these have attachments that come through with known file extensions. So I think one of the first things you should do is you create a few custom mail flow rules where all mail coming in gets checked against this rule, and if any of these conditions exist, then that mail is blocked. So if you look up on Microsoft's website, they have some documentation out there that tells you the most common file extensions. If you don't have that in place, I would certainly do that, because that's going to be just a very good way to limit the risk of known threats that are out there today. The next level up above on that, which will also automate that process, but it's a separate licensing version though, is going to be the Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection. So they have the ATP, they have that platform for Office 365. It's also available for Windows 10 and Azure infrastructure as well. And we should, we'll hit that on a different day as well. But in terms of just focusing on Office 365 ATP, that's going to be another layer beyond your spam filter that is going to analyze every bit of email coming in. It's got a bit of a AI learning element to it, where it knows the trends of what the users are doing. So what I mean by that is, if all of a sudden an account is starting to send emails out at 3:30 in the morning, and that user hasn't sent an email past 8 p.m. in 6 to 7 months, it's going to probably flag that user as suspicious and kind of quarantine it from the rest of the company. And based on the rules you have now, your administrator can either go in and approve that and say, yep, that's okay, or you might realize that maybe this account is compromised. So it kind of gives you that 24/7 extra layer of monitoring. It's almost as if you have somebody sitting there looking at logs all day of emails going in and out and making decisions based on validity. The other thing it does too is it has a lot of automated blocking in terms of analyzing links. It's a safe link technology, it's what it's called, and also analyzing the attachments. So any email coming through that has a hyperlink directing you to somewhere else, or a attachment that needs to be downloaded, it's going to scan both of those to see, is this a known valid site? Is this document simply just a Word document, or is there some embedded macros or something that's going to deliver a payload that starts to encrypt your business? So, at the minimum, I would at least set up some of those manual forwarding rules to block the known extensions. And aside from that, though, the ATP is the most preferred way, just to automate it and make sure that you're good to go without the worry.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that really covers the top 6 ways, your best practices when it comes to securing Microsoft 365. And all of those, as I mentioned, are good whether you're on Microsoft 365 as a standard or premium. Now, in a later podcast, we'll talk about the differences between standard and premium and get into, there's really 4 more, or even more than that we can talk about when you go into premium, as well as we can talk about ATP in more depth. We can talk about EMS in more depth. There's a lot of other security features that we can bring in, Microsoft Secure Score and so on. So we'll get into those more at a future time. But really, we wanted to kind of focus in on something that would apply to all Microsoft 365 accounts and the best practices. That really doesn't matter what your business is, what your vertical is. this should be in place. These top 6 things should be in place no matter what. So, it's some good thought for everybody. And, as always, Vision Computer Solutions, we're here to help anybody that wants to get this stuff set up and, doesn't have the expertise to do so. We've done plenty of it, and we're happy to help anybody that we can. So we'll say goodbye for this week, and we'll look forward to talking to you again next week.
Interact with Tech Talk Detroit at techtalkdetroit.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.